Good morning, everyone. I'm Kat McLaughlin. We'll just give it 30 seconds just till people come in from the lobby, and then we'll get started. Okay, I think I'll get started now. So, good morning, everyone, and welcome to this webinar. I'm Kat McLaughlin, and I'm delighted to be your chair today for the launch of the third cycle of RUMA Agriculture Targets Task Force Targets, the TTF3. Just a few housekeeping issues first. To help the session run smoothly today, there's a couple of things that I just want to go over. Your cameras and microphones should all be muted, but if not, please can you do so? You can see that we're running the session via Teams, and today's speakers will shortly share their screens to present their updates. We have a very packed agenda today, though, which means that we won't have time for questions. But if you do have any questions after the webinar, please do get in touch using the contact form on the RUMA website. Before we get started, I wanted to take a moment to thank the RUMA Agriculture Targets Task Force for their hard work and contributions to the development of the TTF3 targets. The work to shape the targets has been underway throughout the year and has involved input and engagement from many, many stakeholders. First of all, today, I am also delighted to welcome and introduce Baroness Hayman, who will be sharing her thoughts on the work of UK livestock sectors in tackling AMR and her response to the launch of the TTF3 targets. Baroness Hayman was appointed Parliamentary Under Secretary of State at the Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs in July 2024, with responsibility for biosecurity and animal welfare. Baroness Hayman, can I hand over to you, please?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Kat. And good morning, everybody. It's a real pleasure to be able to join you this morning for the launch of the third phase of the RUMA Targets Task Force. And I'd like to also start by thanking RUMA Agriculture for everything they do and for inviting me to open this webinar and for its leadership in driving forward the UK's efforts to tackle antimicrobial resistance. We know that AMR is one of the most pressing health challenges of our time. And it's not just a national issue, it's a global threat that jeopardizes human health, animal health, food security, economic stability, and our ability to achieve our international sustainable development goals. But tackling AMR requires a One Health approach, both domestically and globally. And that means that every sector, that's human, animal and environment, has a role to play. And today's event is a clear demonstration of how the animal health and agricultural sector are facing into that shared responsibility. So I want to commend the UK livestock sectors for their ongoing commitment to antibiotic stewardship. The new national level targets reflect enduring sectoral engagement, continued commitment to responsible antibiotic stewardship, and alignment with the UK AMR NAB, which dates back to the Targets Task Force's formation back in 2016. And we can see progress by the 57% reduction in all antibiotics used in UK food animals since 2014. And the 84% reduction in the use of highest priority, critically important antibiotics. That's the antibiotics most critical for human medicine. But importantly, we can also see from our government surveillance that your efforts are working. Our key indicators for resistance show a declining trend that closely follows national reductions in veterinary antibiotic sales. And these achievements place the UK amongst the most progressive nations in tackling AMR in agriculture. And they've been recognised globally and are a testament to the dedication and collaboration across the UK's farming industry and veterinary sector. And today marks the beginning of the third cycle of targets, TTF3, which will run from 2025 to 2029, aligned with the UK National AMR Action Plan. And this phase is significant because, as many of you know, the low-hanging fruit has already been picked. The easy wins are behind us. So further progress is going to be more challenging, but not impossible. But it will require innovation, focus, and continued collaboration. The fact that the veterinary profession and agriculture industry are both stepping up once again shows their determination to protect the effectiveness of these vital medicines for future generations. So I want to congratulate RUMA for its leadership and the Targets Task Force representatives for your tireless efforts. Your work has set a global benchmark for responsible antibiotic use in agriculture. And as we enter this next phase, I encourage everyone, farmers, vets, industry leaders, to back these targets wholeheartedly. Every contribution matters. And together, we can ensure that antibiotics remain effective, safeguarding both animal health and welfare and public health. So finally, I'd like to say, let this launch be a rallying point. AMR is a shared challenge and it demands a shared response. So I urge the entire livestock industry to support the RUMA targets and to continue to drive progress in preventing infections, ensuring responsible antibiotic use, and improving the collection of actionable data. Because by doing so, we protect not only the health of our animals, but the health of our communities and future generations. So once again, thank you. Thank you for all the work you do, and I wish you a productive and inspiring webinar today.
Thank you so much, Baroness Heyman. So I think just to recap, there's an awful lot of what you said that I think has very much been reflected in the previous webinars that we've had this month. I welcome your comments around the contribution that the industry has made to the global efforts to deal with the risk of AMR. I also welcome as well the response and the encouragement that we've seen, certainly through the likes of the UK NAP. There's a couple of slides towards the end that we can come into that a little bit more, but it's really heartening, I think, to see the work that the TTF3 and all of our partners, our farmers, our vets have been making over the years, to see that it is actually paying off and that it's being recognised. I was really pleased to see and hear some of your words around global benchmark. I think this is one thing that I've found over the years that I've been involved. It's absolutely amazing what industry collaboration and working together can do once you have hearts and minds involved. I think you can move mountains, can't you? And I think that's what we've done, and I'm absolutely looking forward to continuing that. So thank you very much, Baroness Heyman. Your words have really set us off very well for today's webinar, and I do appreciate your ongoing support with what we're doing.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And as I said, have a really good day.
Thank you. I would now like to introduce Chris Lloyd, RUMA Agriculture Secretary General, who will provide a brief overview of the history of the Targets Task Force. Chris?
Thanks, Kat. But yeah, just before we get into the actual sector commitments that are part of the Target Task Force TTF3, just wanted to answer some of the questions that were often asked about the Targets Task Force. So just as Baroness Heyman just alluded to, the Target Task Force goes back to 2016, and it was developed, instigated by RUMA in response to the Lord O'Neill report, which was a report looking at the potential challenge that antimicrobial resistance faced for human and human health going forward, with the potentially millions of lives lost because we can't treat diseases with antibiotics. And the UK government at the time made antimicrobial resistance one of its key targets, one of its key areas of focus under a One Health banner. So that means addressing it from a human medicine point of view, an environmental point of view, but also from an agricultural and a livestock perspective, animal health. So RUMA took the leadership to pull together representatives from each of the sectors. At that time in 2015, 2016, the British Poultry Council had already got a really well-established antibiotic stewardship program. So there was an example there that we could follow. The pig industry was just coming online with theirs, but for many of the other sectors, antimicrobial resistance just wasn't a topic that was being discussed. The first targets were published in 2017, followed with TTF2 in 2020, and then today is the launch of the third cycle of those targets. So what is the Target Task Force? As I've explained, it's coordinated and led by RUMA, but actually it's all about the sector representation, and every livestock sector across farmed livestock and fish are represented on the Target Task Force. We have a farmer and a vet representative from each of the sectors, and that's absolutely crucial because if we are to address these issues and ensure responsible use of antibiotics across the board, there will be a need to change minds and change entrenched attitudes. And so it's really important that we have a farmer perspective and a veterinary perspective in those discussions. It's also important that all of the stakeholders that represent those sectors buy into the concept of the targets and trying to achieve good stewardship. Every sector has different challenges. They're different sizes, their level of integration is different, their disease challenges are different. So every sector has to kind of consider their circumstances individually, but there is a value of coming together, a fact that the feeling that we're all in a shared challenge, we're all addressing this together, that every sector is stepping up to do their bit. There's a real sense of togetherness in terms of being part of a group with a common challenge. Data helps identify some of the key actions for some of the sectors. It helps us track progress, tracks the progress of the targets, our progress towards the targets, and where we have it, it can provide motivation. We can use national level data. So you'll see that in the VARS report, the top level figure of how many antibiotics we use in the UK across agriculture. But at a farm level, it can help a vet and a farmer discuss that enterprise's disease challenges, the reactions that they've made to that. It can help motivate farm staff, and it can also be useful as another farm benchmark tool to see where my farm sits compared to other farms like mine. So going back to those early days, as I explained, there was the poultry sector had a stewardship council, the pig industry was developing one, but other than that, there were no groups out there in the rest of the sectors that were championing or representing the antibiotic issue. So over the lifetime of the first phase of targets, our representatives were really important in not only going out and engaging with stakeholders, but bringing them together in their sectors. And what we saw was the establishment of groups like the Cattle Antibiotic Guardian Group, the Sheep Antibiotic Guardian Group, and every sector now has a stakeholder group which comes together to consider the stewardship of antibiotics in that sector. Those sector subgroups have ownership of the targets. And it's quite right that they do, because they understand the drivers for antibiotic use, they understand the initiatives that are at play within those sectors, the intricate linkages between all the different elements of that particular industry along its supply chain. So it's absolutely right that the sectors identify and take ownership and drive those targets. RUMA's role is to promote that, to amplify those messages and demonstrate what as a collective we're doing across agriculture. Where available, we use data to inform those decisions, but that's not always possible in every sector. If we think about how these targets, TTF3 targets, have come about, the discussions for this started back in 2024 with our RUMA Targets Task Force, with that vet and farmer producer representative from each sector. We discussed a time frame, and we came together again last December, discussing this kind of overarching direction for targets, some of the challenges that the sectors were facing, the issue that some have leveled out because they're reaching a sustainable level, and how do we still celebrate that as an achievable target? So there was again this coming together. The fact that we're all in this was really important. The representatives then went back to their various sectors to discuss what the next phase of commitments could look like for that particular sector. We met in May. RUMA have collated those, and then we've promoted the targets you're going to see today, or draft versions of them, to all of the CVOs of the UK, to the Veterinary Medicines Directorate, to the AMR National Action Plan, Animal Health and Welfare Board for England, and the Food Industry Initiative for Antimicrobials, which represents the food businesses. We presented those targets for two reasons: to sense check them, but also with the hope that they will be supported by all of the key organisations at that national level across the UK. Any feedback we received was fed back to the target task force representatives, and the final the targets you see today are the refined versions following that feedback. But the delivery of these targets is completely in the control of those sector groups and the sector organisations. RUMA has no influence on that. We can advise and we can share. One of our important roles is sharing what's happening across the sectors, but ultimately the delivery of the targets rests with the sectors. I just want to finish on one slide, that we will get into some of the challenges of how we move forward in this next phase of the targets. But just to kind of flag up, and anyone who was on the webinar last week will have heard about new metrics being used across Europe. And that's important for us because those new metrics probably represent better the kind of production systems that we've got in the UK. So as you get into the targets, all of the sectors are looking at whether those EU metrics are relevant to the UK situation, and whether we should adopt those metrics for the way that we calculate our antibiotic use. As a general rule, those new EU metrics bring in some different categories. They quite often increase the weights of animals that are being considered in the conclusion, the denominator. And so if we're looking at European numbers, those numbers will look lower than our historic numbers have been in the UK. So it's important for us in terms of transparency, perhaps, to consider moving across to those metrics. And all of the sectors are considering the challenge of that for the next phase of the targets. So I'm going to pause there and bring in the people that really drive this. It's the sector representatives that sit on the targets task force.
Thank you very much, Chris. I have to say, it never fails to impress me how much has been achieved by the TTF. So it's now time to share details about the TTF targets. And as Chris said, we're going to be joined today by a number of sector representatives. Sadly, not every sector can be present in person today, so Chris will present in their place. But first, I just want to set the scene. As the TTF enters its 9th official year in existence, there is much to be praised with what has been achieved to date so far. So we've had a 57% reduction in the use of antibiotics across UK livestock sectors, and HPCIA use in livestock sectors is down by 83%. As you've heard, the TTF3 represents commitments from each livestock sector from 2025 to 2029, in line with the government's AMR National Action Plan. And the TTF3 report contains a top-level summary of each sector's TTF3 targets, plus an overview of the wider work underway on AMS activities. So that's projects and campaigns as well, which will support the delivery of the targets throughout this third cycle of the TTF. The key focus of the TTF group is to demonstrate the UK livestock industry's commitment to tackling AMR, and where antibiotics are used in farm animals, that they are used responsibly. Next slide, please. It should be noted that there are several key factors that can affect the journey of the targets. For some sectors, sustainable levels of use may already have been reduced. This isn't about being complacent. but there is a need for realism and understanding that in some cases, the journey ahead will be about maintenance of low use rather than pushing for further reductions, which could have a detrimental impact on animal welfare. How the sectors demonstrate their commitment to responsible use varies based on the sector, its size, and their own unique challenges and infrastructures. Some sectors have the benefit of data, which helps evidence progress. For others, data is less available, but the commitment and focus is still evident, just demonstrated differently. RUMA agriculture has encouraged sectors to set targets which are relevant and can be properly measured and reported on. Vaccine availability has been a challenge for some sectors and has the potential to affect antibiotic use. And RUMA Agriculture is pleased to see the recent publication of the Statement of Intent on UK veterinary vaccine availability by the Veterinary Medicines Directorate, which has demonstrated a commitment to working alongside the agriculture sector to support farmers having access to the vaccines they need. We are proud to have contributed to this strategic framework and look forward to working with the VMD on a 5-year multi-stakeholder UK action plan that will turn these ambitions into reality. Climate change creates challenges, especially for those farming systems based outdoors. We've had disease outbreaks. So for instance, avian flu, blue tongue, Schmallenberg, plus new emerging diseases, which all present new health challenges. It should also be noted that during the next cycle of targets, if new reporting metrics do become available for sectors, which will help to further demonstrate their responsible use commitments, then these will be introduced if or as appropriate along the way. In addition, the ruminant sector is undertaking a key piece of strategic work to shape its future AMU commitments with the launch of the UK Ruminant Antibiotic Stewardship Roadmap. Once this roadmap is complete, the targets for the ruminant sector are likely to be evolved and refined. And as you've heard, the EU now uses new metrics for calculating antibiotic use relevant to the animal population. Some UK livestock sectors are transitioning to reflect these metrics if it is felt appropriate to do so. More detail on the new EU metrics can be found in the VMD's Veterinary Antimicrobial Resistance and Sales Surveillance, that's the VARS report, which was published on the 18th of November. So I'd like to now pass to Mark to introduce the beef, dairy and calf sector targets. Over to you, Mark.
Good morning, and thank you very much, Kat, for the introduction. Thank you very much for joining us today. The beef and the dairy and the calf sector has had an interesting 5 years. Data collection has remained a challenge across the ruminant sectors in this time, owing to the scale and diversity of farming systems and lack of vertical integration. And this has presented us with some interesting challenges. We are collecting data. We're collecting quite substantial amounts of data, as you'll see within the RUMA TTF report that's just been published. However, we are very aware that it's not entirely representative of the sectors, and that makes us nervous to use that as either a baseline for the sectors or as a flagpole to place in the ground as, you know, our use, if you like. And those challenges around data are something that we're learning about all the time. We've learned how collecting data can be challenging. We've learned about how cleaning data can be very challenging, and we're building on that to ensure that going forwards we've got a much better idea of how to deal with this data in a way that allows us to use it in a very constructive fashion. To address this, as Kat has alluded to, we have launched the UK Ruminant Antibiotic Stewardship Roadmap. This is a piece of work which Fiona will cover in a little bit more detail later. But the aim is to explore the challenges we have around data, understand better how we can integrate that with both national policy and other initiatives that are taking place as well. And ultimately, at the end of it, provide farmers with a much better use of their data to provide a national picture for what is going on in the UK. The roadmap will form the basis of our ruminant stewardship plan, as you can see on the slide, and we intend to publish this by the autumn of 2026. The intention with this piece of work, as Kat has said, is to enable us to refine targets if that is required. It doesn't mean we haven't got targets. It means that we are aware that we can improve on what we do have and that we will do so. Next slide, please. Thank you. We previously in TTF2 had 24 targets, which was quite burdensome in some ways. We'd set the targets when data collection wasn't possible. We didn't have a data collection vehicle to collect with. We now have Medicine Hub at AHDB, and the work that has gone on behind the scenes with the data processing and collection there has been really impressive over the last 3 or 4 years. We have also run into a scenario where we can't actually collect some of the targets, data for the targets that we previously were able to. So, for example, calf mortality data that would have come from BCMS is no longer available to us. So we aren't able to collect and report that, as you will have seen in previous reports. So we've taken a view that we had too many targets and that we needed to refine them to make industry communication easier and clearer. And we also needed to focus in on what were the real key priorities off the back of the renewed target launch. It says here, in time, more metrics will become available. Well, yes, they will. We've been using the PCU metric early on in my tenure to report on the beef and the dairy sectors, and that has been now superseded by the new EU metric. And ruminants have, cattle in particular, have the biggest change in reporting using the new EU metric versus the old PCU metric. My feeling is it's a lot more representative than the old metric. However, we are aware that it presents some real challenges with farmer communication in particular, because farmers seeing their use change drastically from what has been reported at either a national level or on farm versus the new reporting method might well give either a false indication of success or failure. And we don't want that. So we're very aware that as part of the work we're doing, we need to ensure the communication around that change is managed well and consistently across the whole industry as well. Excuse me. We have identified an uptick in use in calf oral antibiotics, and therefore we have a new target to address this. This actually came about in 2 ways. Whilst we were undergoing the target refresh, several of my vets in my group highlighted the fact that they felt that calf oral antibiotic use had risen in some of their practices. They also felt that we ought to be looking into it a little bit more. And coincidentally, the VMD at the same time were able to see an uptick in use in sales data. We've got no desire to hide anything like this, and you will see in the VARS report and also in the TTF report that both the VMD and RUMA have published the details around this. Next slide, please. So as part of the ongoing reporting, we're going to actually restructure how we report in the TTF reports. We're going to have some headline targets, which you'll see in a minute, and the other targets which we have tried to consolidate into a more text-based sort of reporting metric. If you were to visit the old TTF reports, you'll see it's very tabular, it's very cluttered at times, and it doesn't allow us to fully explain the initiatives that are going on in Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland, for example, but as well as we could do. And the intention is to give much more prominence and recognition to the work that's going on in the nations, as well as the full UK picture. We will cover within that health and welfare, BVD, vaccine use, other initiatives, health and welfare initiatives, as you can see. And we will still include things like mortality studies. There are lots of things which we've come across which occur on an irregular basis. A very good report comes out in 1 year. We can't use it as a target, but actually it helps provide a lot of context as to what's going on in the sector. Next slide, please. So the targets as they stand at the moment for TTF3, as we've just published, sales of lactating cow tubes in dairy, we will continue to aim for annual reductions in the 3-year rolling average. We have removed the need for a baseline within this target because we sit well below it and have done for some time. We'll report this using a graph each year, and we will try and ensure that communication to vets and farmers around this is a lot clearer. The sales of dry cow tubes will follow a similar annual reduction in the 3-year rolling average. HPCIA use, we've had a lot of conversations around this. We feel that we might be approaching the point where we've bottomed out, but we still believe there might be opportunities for reductions as well. So therefore, we are going to continue to try and reduce the use of cattle injectables versus the previous year. And we will present that again in a graphical fashion within the report. Reductions in tubes for dairy cows by 2024. Again, this is HPCA now, and we will again aim for reductions within this. The calf oral antibiotics are our new targets. We are aiming to reduce use of calf oral antibiotics by 10% on the previous year. We have had a rise in use over the last couple of years. This has come about for a number of reasons that we're aware of, but we think there are other factors at play as well. We know, for example, that the bull calf initiative, which resulted in a lot more bull calves being kept on farm, has had an impact in terms of the need for antibiotic use. We've also seen a rise in animal values over the past 2 or 3 years as well, which has also contributed to the use rising, we believe. There could well be other factors at play as well, and that's part of what we're looking to explore within the roadmap work. Next slide, please. So I won't run through this in too great detail at the moment, because I believe that I'm about to pass to Fiona, and Fiona will do. But the aim is to include everybody that's involved within the dairy, beef and sheep supply chains. We're looking to promote and demonstrate responsible antibiotic stewardship, and to clearly define the required data for use both on farm and to satisfy both the authorities and our customers. We would like everybody to play their part in this, and you are very welcome to join our mailing list for further updates using the QR code. And I believe at this point I hand over to Fiona Lovett in the sheep sector. Is that correct?
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, we just go back to the slide that Mark's just talked about, the ruminant antibiotic stewardship roadmap. It's very much ruminants. So the cattle and sheep antibiotic guardian groups are working very much together on this, in recognition that so many of our sheep farmers are also cattle farmers, and so many of our farm vets are working alongside each other. And the reason we are sort of launching the roadmap as a key part of our target for the ruminants is because we recognise that promoting and demonstrating our responsible use via data is key, and we so much want everyone within the industry to get on board. So if you haven't already signed up, and you haven't, please do link in, use a QR code, and we will get back to you. And we're basically contacting all vets and farmers. So next slide, please, Mary. The roadmap is obviously it's a cattle and sheep antibiotic guardian group. It's we've had the opportunity to work through the amassed group, a group of academics, a transdisciplinary network, and also RCVS Knowledge is leading on that. But it's so much a collaborative event, and that's because of the roadmap. We're being very brave and not putting data targets up at this stage. That's something that we very much want to come to once we have gathered in views across the sectors. So we have a clear plan within the roadmap to talk to our vets, our farmers, and right across our ruminant supply chains. We'll bring this together in person in the summer, and actually publish a roadmap a year from now in the autumn. Thanks, Mary. Next slide. We don't want to say what the roadmap's going to look like, because we don't know, because that's the whole point of it. But where we would like to get to is commitment at farm level, and in terms of how farmers are engaging with their vets. And a key part of the farmer vet engagement in the sheep targets alongside the roadmap will be a lambing survey. So we've done a few pilots over the last few years. We've got a few bits of scattered data about what happens in lambing at lambing time. Neonatal antibiotic use used to be a big part of our targets, because it was a measure we could use very clearly, because we had products that were licensed or licensed in piglets and sheep, but predominantly used in lambs, that we could measure that very clearly across the nation. We actually feel that gathering survey data from farmers across the UK would be a good thing to do. So that the lambing survey is alongside the roadmap. Vet commitments. Vets are key. Vets are key in prescribing antibiotics, and they have their own data. So the vets are important to input into the roadmap, but we will also use vets to access farmers for the lambing survey. And then, of course, we need commitments across the whole supply chain. Within the next few weeks, the roadmap will be launching a survey and asking for views from our farmers, our vets, and across our supply chains, so that we can take in people's views. And as I say, as we publish the roadmap in a year, we will have clear evidence from right across the sectors and all over the UK, what's working well and how can we capitalise on that, and how can we move forward with clear targets in a year's time. Next slide. Oh, this is our next slide. So that just summarises our roadmap and the National Lambing Survey, and we'll put clearer targets in within a year from now. And I think I am now passing on to Alex in the pork sector.
Good morning, and thank you very much for the opportunity to share our targets with you all today. The pig sector has spent this preparatory period reflecting on what was achieved in the TTF1 and TTF2 iterations of the process, what challenges we've met, and what we may be looking to meet in the future, so that we could bring together and build upon the successes of the previous iterations. We've also acknowledged what the VND has asked us in terms of being ambitious as well as realistic with what is achievable. And this has enabled us to look at some of the previous targets and how we could refresh those for the TTF phase. You can see from this slide, we're still looking at in-feed versus in-water antibiotic administration through this next phase, while still maintaining a reality around appropriate methods of administration in specific farming systems. In TTF2, we used abattoir data, and the scheme that was in existence has ceased during that particular phase, but we are looking at other abattoir data streams that can feed into the TTF3 project, so that we can utilise that both to benchmark what is happening with herds that have reduced antibiotic usage, to make sure that we're acknowledging that animal health and welfare is still at the heart of what we're trying to achieve, but also just looking at what the trends are and how that relates disease to antibiotic usage. Biosecurity is fundamental in helping us as vets and producers to protect herds, to reduce disease spread, and therefore help to manage antibiotic usage by managing disease. We're lucky enough to be able to have an opportunity to use a numerical method of managing biosecurity, so that we can actually put further data into this process and it be more tangible to understand biosecurity and what its impact would be. Thanks, Mary. So looking to the actual targets and how they compare to TTF2, we've very much looked at what we've achieved over the last 4 years and consulted with the sector as to what we feel is ambitious but also realistic, hence the aim for a 20% reduction in antibiotic usage. And this is backed up by the EMB data that we collect as a sector. We continue to look to maintain a very low HPCIA usage throughout this next phase of targets. Next slide, please, Mary. And sort of reflecting back on what Baroness Hayman had to say about low-hanging fruit having been picked, we have revisited the persistently high user category and made the decision to expand this to the top 10% rather than the top 5% of users defined within the EMB data, in order to be able to bring in a wider range of producers and be able to help provide support to those producers that may be struggling to find ways to address antibiotic usage. We're looking to research streams and partner with groups such as AMAST in order to help provide that additional diagnostic support to that category so that we can then produce some usable measures that can be shared across the whole sector and between sectors as well. Next slide, please, Mary. And finally, on sort of giving some clarity around the numerical target, as has been spoken about in previous webinars and also by other sectors, we are looking to adopt the new EU metric of mgs per kg to replace the traditional milligrams per PCU that we've used historically. With this does come a communication piece that will roll out across the next 4 years. We're conscious that this shouldn't become confusing to producers or vets, but by making this move across to the EU metric, it maintains our ability to look to our European colleagues and how their data is presented and be able to review ours in a comparable way. There is also already work in progress within EMB to look to make the changes that are needed for the weight brackets, and also we're beginning work on the communications that will go alongside this change of metric to make sure that producers, vets and farmers and the wider livestock sector understand how the future data is presented in comparison to previous year's data. Thank you very much. I'll hand on to Ian Beryl from the salmon sector.
Thanks, Alex. Yes, I'm Ian Beryl. I work with the trade body for the salmon sector. And before I give my updates, I probably just want to put into some context where some of the sort of fortuitous position that we sit in because of the consolidation that we have within the sector. We have a relatively small number of veterinary practices which support our farmers. And so some of the understandable challenges that my colleagues have mentioned around data are not ones that we face, and we know we're in a very privileged position in that regard. So I'll touch on that in a moment. With regards to our overview, we have been committed to the Targets Task Force from the beginning, similar to all the other sectors, and we have had some good successes in regards to the targets and the metrics that we've set ourselves, hitting most of them throughout the period of the 2 Targets Task Force phases. I'll come on to in a moment the actual metric we have around antibiotic use, because it is very ambitious, but we were in a very good position towards the end of the cycle of Targets Task Force 2, and we actually hit our target and had the lowest antibiotic use since we first started publishing in 2017. And for anybody who understands salmon production, you will know that we produce the production cycle involves 2 phases, freshwater and marine phases, and we've observed decreases in use in both of those areas of production. We use treatments in a very limited number of farms, and in Targets Task Force 2 we set a new metric where we wanted to quantify the number of farms that we're actually treating. We've been able to do that successfully, and we see a low number of farms. If we actually compare all farms, then we are basically under about 8% of marine and freshwater farms collectively in terms of use of antibiotics in 2024. So looking to the future, we want to kind of consolidate our position and maintain our core objectives, and that's our plan moving forward. Just looking at some of the challenges that we have and some of the factors that can sort of affect our path moving forward. We farm our salmon in the wild lochs around Scotland's coastline. that is the best environment in our view for farming those fish, but it does bring them into contact with the environment very closely. And what we see is that we sometimes have challenges, particularly around changing climate and the changing oceanographic conditions, which can have effects on the fish. We don't generally see that, but what we do see is that it affects the organisms within which we have in the water around our fish, and that can affect their health and welfare. Typically, I would say that those harmful organisms aren't ones that require antibiotic treatment, but we do know, obviously, that secondary bacterial infections can be a challenge. So it is relevant, highly relevant to our sort of commitments and where we move in terms of antibiotic stewardship. Those challenges were most notable in 2022 and 2023, and we kind of have had a better year in 2024, but we're always mindful of those challenges. So treatment is sometimes a requirement, and we are always acutely aware of that. Next slide, please. If we look at our commitments in the broadest sense, we have adjusted them slightly. We haven't adjusted the commitments overall, but a lot of the commitments, or a number of the commitments, are effectively so ingrained in what we do now that we've taken them out and left them as more context to what we do. And some of those I'll refer to here. In terms of data and information sharing, we, as I've said, are in a very fortuitous position that we have access to pretty much 100% of the production of farmed salmon. So we can collect data from all companies and make that available, and we commit to do that as others do too. As Chris alluded to at the beginning of his presentation, Targets Task Force allowed us and gave us a mechanism to develop a group of the prescribing vets. We have vets from each of the practices which support our sector come together at regular intervals. That was based on the principles of antibiotic stewardship, but of course we've been able to broaden that out, and so there's been some real added value in terms of bringing that veterinary group together at a regular intervals. We have a code of good practice for our production. That is the sort of the baseline of how we all operate, and 100% of farmers operate to that. It includes considerable components around medicine use, biosecurity, and overall fish health best practice, and that is a commitment that all farmers sign up to. A couple of the areas where we are interested in moving forward, we have some opportunities and some interest from various technological development companies around other products, which probably in my own personal view don't necessarily fall within the classic definition of a medicine, but which can provide some health promotion benefits, things like bacteriophages, water conditioners, and we work with those companies and with the regulatory authorities to understand how they can be potentially used in the future and regulated in a responsible manner to allow improvements within the One Health context. And of course, we are founded on research and innovation, and we continue to support those technologies that I referred to, but others from a sort of fundamental science perspective, but also when they move more towards the sort of full-scale research projects. So these are embedded sort of context for us that we've taken out of our targets directly. Next slide, please. So if we look at our targets, the metric which I've referred to before, we set a very ambitious target right at the start of the Targets Task Force initiative of 5 milligrams per kilo or lower. That, I would say, has been a challenge, but we've maintained it throughout the period to ensure that we're keeping that demonstration of our commitment to this. And as I've said, we were able to achieve that target in our final year in Targets Task Force 2, and we're very proud of that fact. In terms of high priority antibiotics, we have a fairly limited availability of antibiotics. We actually only have 2 licensed in the UK, although there are others that can be available through the veterinary cascade. One of those that's available through the veterinary cascade has recently been reclassified as a high priority antibiotic. It was only ever used in very low amounts, and we have effectively reduce that to zero for the time being, and we hope that that will be the situation moving forward. But we are committed to not use high priority antibiotics unless absolutely necessary, and unless sensitivity testing demonstrates that there really is no other option. Next slide, please. If we come on the next slide, so in Targets Task Force 2, we created this new metric which basically looked at the percentage of freshwater and marine farms, and we will continue that. We feel that's a really valuable demonstration of understanding of whether there are differences in where those challenges are, so we maintain that. And underpinning all of this is our commitment to vaccination. So all salmon are vaccinated against, in this context, the most relevant bacterial, but also viral pathogens, and that happens before the seawater phase. We will continue to do that. It sort of underpins a lot of the work within the code of good practice that we have. But we also have some bacterial and other challenges for which there aren't licensed vaccines, and if appropriate, we will use and are committed to use autogenous vaccines where they can be used. So that concludes our section. I'll now hand over to Chris, who I believe is going to cover the trout sector. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Ian. And it's a very similar story, really, for trout. They've achieved some really positive antibiotic reductions over the lifespan of the Target Task Force, and their challenge moving forward is to maintain those low levels of use. But when needed, and in 2022 there was the sector saw an increase in use, which was really just an outbreak of a bacterial disease on one farm. And I think it demonstrates the sort of vulnerability of the sector. There are very few products licensed for use in trout production. The one antibiotic that they can use is oxytetracycline, which is 7 times more antibiotic than most of the other antibiotics that could be used, but it's the only one licensed in trout. So when they need to use it, it's very easy to see a spike in use. Next slide, Mary. In terms of background, I think Ian's covered a lot of this already. Climate change is a big influencing factor in fish production with freshwater temperatures, and it potentially increases bacterial challenge. The sector's fully committed and supported by CFAS and the VMD to look at, they created a bug bank which looks at the bacterial challenges on each of the farms. And what it shows is a lot of the farms are very connected, which makes autogenous vaccines really important in the trout sector. But whereas an autogenous vaccine would really be licensed or available for one particular unit, the trout sector would see that being potentially relevant to a number of units because of this connection of the bacterial challenge. Ian also mentioned the value of vaccines. With limited products available for treatments, prevention is really important, and the sector's committed to vaccine to deployment for prevention of disease. And their wish really is to see availability of vaccines and development of new vaccines in a very open-minded sort of way going forward. They also want to adopt the code of practice, which has antibiotic use ingrained into it, and they're constantly looking at promotion of best practice. Next slide, Mary. So that brings us to the targets. As in salmon, the trout sector want to maintain the target that they've got at the moment. They're currently tracking below that, but as has been experienced, there can be spikes, and there will be challenges further down the road. But they also want to follow the salmon sector and develop a metric for percentage of fish treated. I'm going to hand over to the game sector and Paul Jeevens.
Morning, everybody. Chris, can you hear me? Right. What the game sector is very lucky about, it has a very high voluntary collection of AB usage data at 92%. But the Target Task Force 2 cycle has been very volatile due to 2 years with COVID restrictions, notably 20 and 21, then catastrophic reductions in game bird eggs from France due to avian flu in 22, followed by very wet springs and summers and autumns in 23 and 24. Climate change is a real big effect on our sector, as we've heard in other sectors. Because we rear extensively on grass, wet conditions promote protozoal and coccidiosis, which often require AB treatment. It is also felt that the value of game birds has risen since AI in France, so justifying more investment in bird health to keep everyone alive. The sector has mentored on responsible prescribing during TTF2 and has achieved a 77% reduction in compounded ABs since the start of Targets Task Force. A release pen scoring matrix has been widely adopted by the sector. The idea is the higher the score, the better the chance of less disease. Going forward, targeted increase in communications across the sector. We've created a new group of all the shooting organisations who meet by Zoom bi-monthly to push comms forward and on time. Promoting timely articles and podcasts to keep the message and pressure on best practice and responsible use of ABs. In TTF3, we will trial and refine a MIGs per kilogram unit that can be used by vets, game rearers and shoots to monitor their own AB usage and to benchmark against lowest users. Game Farm Association is working towards an online training portal that will promote pen scoring, BVPA training modules, biosecurity best practice, and many other things in time. And this will be open to the whole of the shooting sector. Mary, next slide, please. We have flatlined, but we have moved away from higher priority ABs to pelicillins that require more mgs per kilogram for treatments, so not contributing to our total reduction. Going forward, we will continue with the same target for Targets Task Force 3. HPCIAs have been reduced by 30% in the whole of Targets Task Force cycle. We gained data over Targets Task Force 2 cycle for what these important drugs are being used for. Created a sign-off form for justifying use and promoting the use of a lesser priority antibiotic. Working with the Game Feed Trade Association and Agricultural Agencies Confederation, 3 modules have been created for training game feed reps to understand sustainability and AB guardianship, and has been taken up widely. Of the 2 audits available, the British Game Alliance audit proved too onerous and was not widely adopted, but the vet-led trusted game health and welfare audit has become popular, and the target is for 1,000 sites to be annually visited by the end of Targets Task Force 3. We're also working with a must to try and fund a PhD student to investigate gut health to gain knowledge of our protozoal problems. Can I introduce Mike Tyers on laying hens? Thank you.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for the opportunity. So I represent the British Egg Industry Council as a technical advisor. Just give a quick overview as to what's happening in the laying hen sector. First of all, we were already relatively low users of antibiotics anyway, but we don't therefore, and we were below our target for TTF2, and very briefly, we don't intend to change the target for TTF3, and I'll come on to that in a bit. But that's not to say that we're complacent, and it's not to say that we haven't got some issues that we need to be aware of. First of all, as a sector, and this is without any mandate whatsoever, but consumer demand has led to increasing number of or increasing requirement to say for birds to be kept in outdoor systems, free range and organic. So now something like about 70 to 75% of all eggs are actually produced in outdoor systems. And of course, this exposes birds to the environment where perhaps they didn't have it before, and there's less control over weather, soil conditions, access to other pathogens, not exclusively things like avian influenza as well, and of course those can precipitate disease. On the opposite side, and I'll just skip to the next part of it, we've had avian influenza outbreaks over the last several years. This year, unfortunately, is looking quite dramatic. And that has meant to birds being housed under legal requirements. So while we welcome outdoor systems which give birds a bit of extra freedom, if that's the right way of putting it, when they are rehoused back into houses again, that puts some extra pressure on those birds, and there is a potential danger for disease prevalence where that happens, not least of which if there's any secondary infections that we're having to face. The other big issue that we're facing as a sector is there is an increasing trend, and it's a good trend actually, towards longer lived birds. That now birds are going, even including brown hens, to 80 plus weeks. White birds have been going to over 100 weeks. I think it was mentioned earlier on in another sector, we're broken down into two parts in our industry. We have the rearing phase and the laying phase. All of our vaccinations occur for the protection of the birds in the rearing phase. That's up to 18 weeks, and of course we expect those vaccines to protect the bird for the rest of its life, with no opportunity really to vaccinate or to do anything else after that. Which means that obviously their immunity is starting to dwindle the longer the birds are living. But having said that, so we're not intending to move our targets from TTF2 to TTF3. If you move on to the next slide, please. We're very lucky in our sector in that we, as a BEIC, we represent something like about 90% of all the egg production in the UK. We have a code of practice currently on version 8, constantly being updated as well, to which all our subscribers comply. And this assurance scheme, which is unique to our industry, it's entirely controlled within our own sector, mandates enhanced veterinary oversight. So we have a limited number of veterinary practices, I think it's a maximum of 7, that operate, specialist vets, particularly to our sector, and we collaborate with them to be able to gather the information that we require. So part of the standard is that every farmer has to report whenever they use any antibiotics in their system, and that's how we can gather the information in collaboration with the vets. As I say, we don't use the same metric as some other sectors, because we feel the way that we do it, we calculate our antibiotic use in terms of bird days. The weight of the bird is not very significant to us. The lifetime of the bird is actually quite prolonged. And of course, we're not dealing with the bird itself, we're dealing with the product that comes out of it, the eggs. So we feel that treatment days is probably a better metric to be able to measure it. But it might be different to what's required elsewhere. We have to be aware that, and again, it's part within the code, that whether it be for avian influenza or for any other diseases that may challenge, biosecurity is absolutely critical, and so therefore we continue to work not only within the assurance scheme, but also with vets and with producers to ensure that biosecurity is absolutely critical. Next slide, please. So in terms of our targets, antibiotic use is set, as I say, set on a metric. So we're at 1% bird days treated. We've been below that target, and we don't intend to change that target. We hope not to exceed it. We've been below it already. In terms of the high priority ones, we were lucky enough to be able to pinpoint just the use of one high priority CIA since 2016. And because we were able to pinpoint it just down to one case, this was actually in a broiler breeder flock, in a parent breeder flock, where of course the eggs were not going back into the human food chain anyway. And it's very, very rare for us to have to use it. Again, not by mandate, but we tend to administer all our antibiotics through the water, with no in-feed medication. That's not mandated, that's just the way it is, and therefore it avoids the danger of any antibiotics getting into feed and being traced back through feed mills. So that's really where we sit as a sector, and pass on to Daniel now for the poultry meat.
Thanks, Mike. My name's Daniel Parker. I am a vet working in the poultry sector. I'd like to talk about the poultry meat sector targets. As Chris alluded to early in the presentation, the poultry meat sector actually started to develop its antibiotic stewardship group back in 2011, and by the time the first target task force was established, a lot of the low-hanging fruit had already been taken, and the sector has actually consistently achieved a level of usage below the national average use for all our agricultural sector over the past 9 years in broilers and for the last 8 years in turkeys. Really, this has not been achieved by setting targets, but by the producer's commitment to responsible use. The Targets Task Force target remains focused on national average use across the sector. Unfortunately, some stakeholders have incorrectly interpreted these targets as individual farm targets. And to illustrate that, I'd just like to say what the problem is with using national targets as farm targets. So if I have a broiler farm with 8 houses, each of 30,000 broilers at 28 days of age, and the birds have a bacterial infection that requires treatment with an antibiotic, where the summary of product characteristics, the SPC, says the dose rate should be 20 milligrams per kilogram of the bird body weight for 3 days, then the milligrams per PCU for that farm would actually end up being 14.5 milligrams per PCU. Thus, to comply with the Targets Task Force 2 target set by the stewardship group, only 1 house could be treated out of that 8 if the Target Task Force 2 target was used as an individual farm target. So we need to avoid that challenge, as vets and producers need to be able to have access to medicines to treat where it's appropriate. Farm targets must be based on specific health and disease scenarios of that enterprise, and therefore national targets should not be applied at farm level. The BPC's antibiotic stewardship is at the core of producers' commitment to progress. Lowering national targets is not considered by the BPC stewardship to be an important driver to this progress, and that's why the targets in Target Task Force 3 will remain the same. The BPC antibiotic stewardship argued that the continual low national antibiotic usage should be the judge of its commitment to the responsible usage, not by setting targets that can be misinterpreted by some stakeholders. Next slide, please, Mary. So, as part of its ongoing commitment to wider stewardship work, the sector will continue to focus on demonstrating leadership on antimicrobial usage and reporting. The BPC produces annually a report on its usage across the sectors, which is published, as we want to be open and honest about the quantities of antibiotics that we use. The stewardship group already has comprehensive guidance for the group on the usage of highest priority critically important antibiotics and prophylactic use of antimicrobials. The BPC, as other sectors have already mentioned, has and will continue to support appropriate research into antimicrobial resistance. And like the pig sector, it is an active partner of the Antimicrobial Resistance in Agri-Food Systems transdisciplinary network. The stewardship group meets several times per year, at which point disease challenges that the industry faces are discussed, and members look to share learnings and experiences in continuing the drive to reduce antimicrobial usage. Next slide, please. So, as mentioned already, our Target Task Force 3 primary targets will remain the same, i.e. 25 milligrams per PCU for broiler production and 50 milligrams per PCU in turkey production. This setting of these targets will not impact on the continual drive by the stewardship group to ensure that we have responsible prescribing and usage by the sector going forward. Thank you very much, Mary. I'll pass back to Kat.
Thank you. So The UK was one of the first countries to establish a national action plan on AMR. Since then, extensive progress has been made in raising the profile of AMR and directing resources to tackle it. And since 2013, the UK has taken a One Health approach to tackling AMR, established with the publication of the 2013 to 2018 AMR strategy. In January 2019, the UK published the vision for AMR to be contained and controlled by 2040. The vision recognises that a global problem as significant and complex as AMR requires long-term action, which must strengthen understanding of AMR itself and understanding of the measures that work best to control it. To deliver the vision, the UK government committed to develop a series of 5-year national action plans. And this quote comes from the Animals, Plants, Food and Environment Delivery Board for the UK AMR National Action Plan. I'll just read the quote out. We welcome and support the RUMA TTF3 targets as a positive step in progressing the UK's One Health approach to tackling AMR in food-producing animals. The new national level targets reflect enduring sectoral engagement, continued commitment to responsible antibiotic stewardship, and alignment with the UK AMR NAP, the National Action Plan, which dates back to the Targets Task Force formation in 2016. We commend RUMA and sectors for their leadership in driving continuous improvement in antibiotic use and disease prevention and tailoring targets to sector-specific challenges. As this work is implemented, we recommend ongoing review and evolution of targets in light of emerging AMU and AMR surveillance data to ensure the hard work of the sectors leads to continued impact in reducing the risk of AMR. So I think it's really important to acknowledge and recognise the NAP support for our industry's efforts. And we are delighted that TTF3 targets are being built into the NAP infrastructure. Next slide, please. So that's the end of the formal presentations. And I just want to thank all of the Target Task Force members that have been here today for their summary of the sector's work. I've been involved with the TTF since it started back in about 2014, I think it was. And I know the effort and commitment that you and your sectors have all made to the industry's success story. I step down as RUMA chair next year, and I can honestly say that working with you all has been a career highlight. But I think we also have to recognise that the combined success has now built an expectation that every year we'll see further reductions. This is not realistic, nor would it be fair to let that expectation go unchallenged. RUMA has always held true to its mantra of as little as possible, as much as necessary. And I think we should stress that over the next TTF period, this remains a relevant principle. Reductions in antibiotics can only be made by balancing the health needs of animals under our care with a functioning and sustainable agricultural sector. We will continue to need antibiotics in our health toolbox, but we also need vaccines, skilled and dedicated stock people and vets, and a supportive farming infrastructure around us. If all the members of the TTF could put their cameras back on again now, we'll go into some questions. Thank you. So, given all the different drivers at play in agriculture at the moment, do you see it as a challenge to retain the farmer vet engagement in responsible antibiotic use going forward? And what can we do to help or encourage that? I'm going to lead, I think, with Mark and then go on to Paul.
Thank you, Kat. yeah, engagement is a challenge. There's no doubt about that. But engagement really needs two things from the farmer point of view, certainly in the ruminant sector. We need engagement to be easy because farmers are not thinking about recording and reporting antibiotic use every single day of their business lives. They're also doing everything else that comes with being a farmer as well. So the engagement with data collection and with communications needs to be easy and straightforward, but it also needs to have purpose. So we need to ensure that when we've got opportunities like the DEFRA pathway, for example, and the mandatory data collection opportunities that might arise, things like that, that we can make the best use of them to ensure that farmers are collecting the right data in a right way, but that actually provides value back to the farmer as well. And I think it was Daniel that was talking earlier on about the use of national targets not being relevant or useful for individual producers. We see the same within our sectors as well. Having a national target or a national figure, which is then compared with an individual farm, isn't helpful. It's actually what's happening on that farm on a year-to-year basis, on a month-to-month basis, that makes the difference. And none of us want to see our animals being, ill in a way that we can't use antibiotics. It's our job to maintain their health and welfare, and that therefore leads to better productivity, better profitability ultimately at the end of the day. And that's what drives engagement, and that's what drives success with this. We can't afford to just go out with a blanket policy or approach which isn't thought through and doesn't engage both farmers and their vets. So I believe, yes, we can engage them, but in the right way, and that's part of the work that the Pathway is trying to do.
Thank you. And Paul, to jump to your sector, what's your response to the engagement challenge, if there is one?
I think we're very lucky that we've got specialist game bird vets sort of dotted all over the country. Also, when they're not doing game birds, can also do poultry work, so it sort of fills their whole year up. And we have noticed that small rearers are actually moving to these specialist game bird vets because there are new challenges out there, new disease, new ways of treating birds. But also at the same time, we've also identified that there's pressure on the vets they've left, the sheep vets and the cattle vets. There's a bit of hoodwinking to say, could we have a script for some antibiotics for the pheasants coming next week. So this is part of our TTF3, is to educate with podcasts and articles in non-game bird literature and podcasts that can give the sheep and the cattle vets confidence to say no. You need to go through a specialist vet if you've got a problem with your game birds. So that's something we want to do going forward. We also trying to encourage the Royal College and the VMD to do some enforcement. That there hasn't been any enforcement really, and one or two cases of prophylactic treatment are getting bypassed, and we really just need some help from those two organisations, just to put a bit of pressure on our sector to just help us with reductions going forward.
Okay, thank you. And we've talked in previous webinars this month about the issues facing the sectors with vaccine supplies. Now, we all recognise that an effective way to reduce antibiotic use in the first instance is to prevent animals from getting sick. How important, I'm wondering, is reliable vaccine supply to your target aspirations? And perhaps in parallel, do you see concerns arising around other veterinary medicines, suggesting a wider supply concern for animal medicines? Alex, I wondered, what's your thoughts on it from the pig sector?
Thanks, Kat. From the pig sector perspective, vaccine availability is vital for maintaining the health and welfare of the animals that we look after, but also as part of our ongoing commitment to responsible use of antibiotics. We have noticed with the supply issues that we've experienced, and I know other sectors have experienced as well, that when certain vaccines are not available or supply is disrupted, sometimes the only alternative to make sure that the animals are appropriately treated and that their welfare isn't impacted negatively is to use antibiotics. And therefore, that's really highlighted for us the importance of sustained and sustainable supply. alongside this, in an ever decreasing usage of antibiotics situation, we can't ignore that this is a commercial world. Pharmaceutical companies are commercial entities, and if the demand for product reduces, there is always the risk that there may not be a viable commercial justification for maintaining those products. But we do have to review that against the landscape, that having appropriate products available to us when needed is important going forwards. So yes, I think being able to access appropriate antibiotics at the right time for the right usage is a message that shouldn't get lost.
And Fiona, I saw you nodding in agreement with some of the things Alex was saying. It's obviously an issue, is it, for the sheep sector?
Yeah, vaccine supply issues are a massive frustration for sheep farmers, but also vets, certainly. And we really appreciate, coming together, and RUMA has worked hard with across the industry that we can all kind of stand together on this. But I don't think I can stress how important vaccines are to us in industry, and how because the sheep industry is very seasonal, if a vaccine is off for a couple of months, particularly, for example, an abortion vaccine, that can have an effect for an entire year's crop. So yeah, anything more that we can do to ensure good vaccine supply would be much, much appreciated by the sheep sector.
Thank you. And I'm looking at the time here, but we should be okay. Ian, I know in your sector you often talk about bacteriophages as an alternative. Do you want to just expand a little bit more on that?
Yeah, I can. I mean, and I would certainly agree with everything that Alex and Fiona have said. Vaccines are so important, and I'm really pleased that there's a national strategy being considered and developed. When we look globally at salmon farming, the impact of vaccines on antibiotic use have been so dramatic. It's unbelievable. But for me, they also tell us how powerful preventative tools can be. And for us, we have a lot of interest in, as I've said, bacteriophages, but I call them compounds, but compounds that can effectively be health promoting compounds, water-based conditioners. And there's real opportunity here, but there are some challenges as well. And I think the challenges rest with the fact that, in my personal view, these compounds, which we have not available to us yet, but have some interest in salmon farming, and I think other sectors will have some interest in these too. These don't, in my view, fall into what is a classical definition of a medicine, but they potentially get caught within medicines regulations. I think they have to have robust regulatory frameworks that allow them to be used. But I think there's a real opportunity moving forward where we look at how we license the range of technologies, medicines, and health promoting compounds that are available to livestock, human and companion animal health, and think about real innovation in the regulatory space, not to take away any of the rigor, not to take away any of the safeguards, but to say there are different ways of doing this. Because if we truly want to work towards One Health, I think we need to look at all the tools that we have available and make sure that those tools are accessible to everybody, because I think that in my view is what One Health is all about.
Okay, thank you. I want to turn your attention now to emerging health challenges. So climate change, for instance, has changed wild bird migration routes, vector competency, our husbandry systems and pathogen burden. And the ability to keep emerging diseases away from our animals is going to be increasingly important. To all of you, and I'm going to have to ask for quite quick, sharp answers here. If you had one ask for your sector's benefit, what would it be? And again, as I say, please keep it brief so that everyone gets a chance. I'm going to start with Alex, I think, please.
A supportive planning environment. Fundamentally, to be able to make further significant strides forward, we need to be able to improve infrastructure. So for the benefit of animal health, welfare, continued good biosecurity and further reductions in antibiotic usage, we need to be able to upgrade the facilities that we actually use to house our animals and allow stock keepers to make further improvements.
Thank you. Daniel.
Our ask is exactly the same. Our biggest problem, in my view, to making further steps is getting better infrastructure, and that's going to also be an issue related to climate change, to ensure that we can actually keep birds in the right environment. So planning currently, I think, is not fit for purpose. We have sites that need refurbishment and we can't get planning permission for it. We need more opportunities to build new buildings. And if we can do that, we'll be able to deliver better health and welfare. And of course, that has an impact because we don't have to use as many medicines. So yeah, planning is the major blocker for us. Thanks, Kat.
Thank you. Fiona?
I think for us, anything that encourages engagement, vet farmer engagement, and across the industry, we have a massive ruminant industry, very extensive, and so encouraging that everybody to be pulling in the same direction, and any way we can encourage that is helpful.
Thank you. Mark?
Yeah, and to build on that point from Fiona, as we share many of the same farmers and vets as well across the ruminant sectors, I think that our big ask, or my big ask, would be let's have more conversations with government to actually help deliver what they need, not necessarily what they want, what they need, and to ensure that we actually are able then to deliver for farmers what they need as well, because there's real opportunities to join up a lot of loose ends here in the next 12 months, and me and Fiona would really like to do that.
Excellent. Ian?
Yeah, I suppose my ask would be relevant to all the others, and that would be around a really innovative regulatory frameworks to support what we do, which kind of feeds into what everybody's talking about there. On the site consenting, I agree wholeheartedly. If we could have a really innovative regulatory framework for salmon farming and for other farms, just to say, to get a salmon farm typically takes about 5 years and 5 consents. It's really difficult to be nimble when you've got those challenges. But around the concepts and the things that I was talking about earlier, you know, all of those health management tools, ensuring we've got really innovative legislation that allows us to access those in a safe and appropriate manner, I think would be really powerful.
Okay, thank you. And Mike?
Yeah, I can't disagree planning, but I just put a little slight twist on it, and that is an understanding from the authorities that, you know, there is conflicting legislation. So, you know, the planning, it may be restricted, not because of space or anything, but because it clashes with some environmental or some marketing regulation or something else. So it's a better understanding that will enable us to get the right planning in the right place for the right purpose. That'd be my ask. Yeah.
Thank you. And Paul?
We use a cascade a list to treat for protozoal diseases, hexameter and trichomonas. And as I mentioned, we'd love to get this research student, PhD student, to actually look into the gut health. We don't even know the lifestyle of these protozoals. Are they spironucleases or something else? So, you know, that could be enormous reduction in antibiotics if we could just understand the lifestyle and how it survives from one season to the next.
Thank you. And Chris, do you want to come in and bring in anything from trout or from your own thoughts?
I think trout's concerns have been covered by the others, but just if I could just add one, I think for me it would be remembering why we're doing all of this. Yes, it's absolutely about showing a commitment and livestock stepping up and contributing to One Health, but it's also about ensuring the long-term effectiveness of the antibiotics and medicines we use on farmers. So my wish is that we don't lose sight of that goal.
Okay, thank you. So I don't think I've forgotten anyone from the sectors, have I? There's quite an array of names and faces, but I just want to thank everyone who has taken part today, to our speakers and everyone who has attended. I'd also like to reflect again on some of the words of Baroness Hayman. She talked about the recognition that we've received on a global scale, how we were a global benchmark, and certainly that does fit with some of the conversations that we in RUMA have had. She talked as well about recognising that the food production and the farm animal production sectors, that we faced into shared responsibilities, and I think that was a really key line for me. So one of the reflections as well that she made, and this was very much from the VMD last week, that I think we need to keep in our minds, and Chris commented on it as well, is why we're doing this. We started doing this because it was to mitigate against AMR. It wasn't to just automatically reduce antibiotics. And the VMD resistance work has shown that there is a definite declining trend of antimicrobial resistance that we're seeing in line with usage reductions. So I think that, to me, is one of the huge things that I think we can all be really proud of. I don't ever want us to lose sight of the wider benefit to why we're doing all of this, because I think it's something really important. So I think we've probably reached the end of this webinar. I just, as I say, want to commend the TTF and the livestock industry and their veterinary profession for their work to date and the work ahead, which is now framed from the great foundations set out in the previous TTF reports and TTF3. You can rewatch this webinar on our website alongside all the other webinars that we've delivered this month. And a final reminder that if you do have any questions, please use the contact form on our website. So thank you everyone for joining today's webinar. Thank you very much. Bye.